Hi, and welcome back to another episode of whatever this is. We have to apologize first and foremost because we didn't record last week. There was no episode last week, and I take the blame for that. There was some bureaucratic stuff, some personal stuff I was involved in throughout the week. But we are back. We are back with a bang. We have a special guest who we'll introduce in just a second. If you're watching the screen, you'll probably have an idea of who it is. But before that, Artem, how does it feel to be back after what seems to be at least 5 years? And how you doing?
Man, I don't know. Like, I've forgotten how to speak. I feel
Yeah,
like for this episode, I'm going to make loads of mistakes and my tongue's going to get twisted every 5 minutes. So I'm just hoping I can avoid that in any way possible. But I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to have another interesting guest on. And I'm excited because the Euros are on. Um, so, Hanu,
yeah,
let's get right into it.
right. So our special guest today is, and it's actually lined up pretty well. We didn't aim for it to be like this, but it's lined up pretty well. It's actually Henry who handles the Rubin Kazan English account. He does a great job on it. Rubin have a phenomenal media team, one of the best in Russia, that's for sure. And Henry's in charge of doing the English stuff. So Henry, how you doing? What's up? And yeah, man, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I would say, you might be exaggerating a little bit when you say a special guest, and I would echo Artem when he says that his tongue is going to get tied. That's also likely to be the case for me because that's just my natural state. But overall, I'm
Right.
I'm doing pretty well, and I'm happy to be on the show.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you on. And the reason it's lined up so perfectly is because Henry, you're of Finnish ancestry and you're supporting them in the Euros, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm just a bit of background for listeners who are completely unaware of my existence, which, no fault of your own. I'm 50-50 Finnish Italian. I'm from the US originally, currently located in Germany. But yeah, in the Euros, I've got a little bit of a split alliance here. Of course, I'm cheering for Finland and Italy, but, my third team is Russia, as on account of my long-standing interest in Russian football and my association with Rubin Kazan. And of course, I should state right here up front that any opinions I express during this podcast episode are solely the views of myself and not of the club. I'm not here as a representative of the club. But yeah, it worked out pretty well that today we just had the Finland-Russia game. So I definitely had a little bit more background knowledge of both teams than the average viewer would. I've written articles about Finnish football. My first podcast appearance ever was actually on the Finnish football show. Shout out to the folks at the Finnish football show. So yeah, I think that it ended up working out pretty well in terms of the timing.
It did, yeah, and especially for us because we were the winners today. But as you said, Russia is indeed your third country, so you're not too upset by the team you lost to.
No, and I
And
know my partner is Russian, so bragging rights go to her on the day. So
all right,
uh,
so that
yeah, she's laughing
so
in
we're
the
not gonna
background.
we're not gonna be the only ones gloating today.
No, there's
So
plenty of gloating going on here.
all right. So yeah, but before we actually get into this game, there's a couple of housekeeping bits we have to do because we didn't record last week. So of course people know what's going on, but it's only fair that we um, say something. Of course, our thoughts are obviously with Christian Eriksen. That seems like it happened 2 years ago as well, but that was horrifying. One of the most easily the scariest thing I've ever seen on a football pitch, maybe ever. We're glad that he's all right. We're glad that he's awake, conscious, and we hope that he'll be able to regain full health. Apart from that, we were on BBC Five last week, Artem, weren't we?
Well, you say we. It was you representing us. So I guess we were, but we weren't, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that is fair. We were BBC Five Sport, like whatever the official name is, were kind enough to invite us for their show that they were doing, which was basically talking about all 24 countries at the Euros. It was a late night show for the UK, which means that it was early morning for me. And I hate early mornings. Like I would rather stay up till 4 a.m. than wake up at 5 a.m. or wake up at 7 a.m. or something like that. I really don't like mornings. But I woke up, I braved my way, and it was a little segment but it was an honor to represent Russia, represent Russian football, represent this podcast, and yeah, we're going to try and go from strength to strength. But
You did a good job on that part. You did a good job on that show as well. I thought that all of your answers were well thought out and were well formulated. Like, obviously, some of the questions that they were asking were a little bit strange.
yeah,
Um, but I thought that you did well overall. And if anyone wants to listen to that, it is on the whatever this is Twitter. We have shared it a couple of times, so you'll be able to find it. It's 3 parts. It's about maybe 3 or 4 minutes long.
yeah,
But it's well worth the listen.
yeah. Um, right. Yeah. So basically, but to be fair, they invited us on. We can't complain too much, even if the questions were slightly off. But before we get into today's game, right? Russia played Belgium last week and got absolutely hammered. Ever since then, I have been in Artem's DMs. I've been in every DM. I've been on my Twitter timeline just slagging off Stanislav Cherchesov because I thought his team selection was shocking. But Artem has been fervently defending the man. He's told me that, you know what, you should believe in him. He shows up in big games. He's a good tactician. But Artem, what did you think of the Belgium game, first of all?
I was watching the Belgium game in my girlfriend's house, right, and her whole family were having dinner, and it was just me sitting on the couch watching the match, stressing out. Um, but it was honestly going into the game. I was kind of like, you know what? I feel like Cherchesov kind of like you said. He shows up in the big games, and I thought that we might get a result. And a lot of people say that Russia played shit in that game. I actually don't think we played that badly. I think that the third goal was really deserved, and the other two were mistakes, really stupid defensive mistakes. And clearly, Cherchesov thought the same thing because both of the players who made those mistakes, Anton Shunin and Semyonov, were both out of the team for today. Um, like, I genuinely think that had Semyonov not made that stupid mistake at the start, and had Shunin not made that, dodgy save straight out to Mounier for the second goal, we would have held on and we would have had our own chances for that. But look, it is what it is. We move, but I think that the hate on the Russia team for that game was a bit overdone. And
Right.
I think that they kind of redeemed themselves today.
That's fair. Henry, what did you think? Did you watch the Russia-Belgium game? And similarly, what do you think of Cherchesov, actually?
Yeah, I did watch the game. I think that Artem has a bit of a rosier view of the game than I did. I thought that it was very poor. We all knew going into the game that Belgium was going to be the dominant side in the game, and we would have expected Russia to play similar to how they played Spain in the World Cup, for example. A very defensive, try to look to counter once or twice throughout the game and hopefully, either keep a clean sheet or perhaps nick one against the run of play or something like that. It just didn't come off. They didn't have possession. They didn't generate much, if any, of a threat. You are right that only the third goal was really deserved. The first two were both errors. The first one a calamitous error, and it could have been worse though. Jakia had a fantastic recovery to stop Lukaku from scoring what almost assuredly would have been another goal, and the pressure was on Russia the entire game. In terms of Cherchesov, I think that I fall somewhat in between the two of you in terms of my view of him. I do think that he is a good tactician, but I do think that in terms of his selection for the Belgium game, absolutely shot himself in the foot. I thought that the decision to go with a back four instead of a back three was a disaster waiting to happen, which of course it ended up being. I thought that Semyonov being in a back four was a disaster waiting to happen, even though he is pretty assured at Akhmat. Of course, it ended up being a disaster. But there was a lot of mistakes in that game. I do think that he's a good manager overall. I think that maybe he's been with the team a little bit too long. We always talk about cycles of teams in terms of a manager has to be able to evolve the team over time, otherwise things get stale. And I think Russia is more or less at that point right now, and he hasn't done a very good job of transitioning to a more fresh lineup, more fresh tactics. Today was, not as bad. I think that some of the changes that he made for today's game, which I'm sure we'll talk about in just a little bit, were encouraging. But overall, I think that over the course of the last year or two, we've seen things get a bit stale. And the Belgium game was a culmination of that staleness, along with some disastrous decision making, both in game and in the selection.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you at all there. I've been pretty critical of Cherchesov for um, I think since the Serbia game. I believe that he should have been sacked at that point. And I really don't think that Russia were even like barely good against Belgium. I thought that, of course, you can't fault the manager for individual errors like those of Shunin and Semyonov, but I still think his formation and his tactics are, they very rarely, or at least in that game and even in the friendlies before that, they're not built to get the best out of Russia's best players like Golovin, Miranchuk, even Denis Makarov, Rifat, people like that. But today, I have to give him props. I thought that the lineup was pretty good, man. Even when I initially saw it, it looked like a 4-3-3. I mean, there are a lot of interpretations that you could have taken from the initial lineup. But he brought in Diviv, he brought in Alexei Miranchuk, who ended up scoring the winner. And even in game, there were certain tweaks that made the squad play a lot better than what they did against Belgium. There was a lot more freedom for the attacking players. The midfielders had, chances to do their stuff. Obviously, Mario's injury is quite sad, but we hope he'll be back soon. Henry, going to you first for the Finnish perspective. How did you think Finland played, and what do you think now of your chances of making it out the group?
I think that the game went about, for 99% of the game, I think that it went right into Finland's plan. I think that Finland's plan was to sit deep, defend well, defend strong, make Zuba win balls in the air, which, to be fair to Zuba, he was quite effective. I mean, every time that the ball went into the air to him, he didn't win it cleanly because Arajuri and Toivio are two really tough defenders. So he didn't win any clean balls in the air, but every time that the ball went up to him, it was a bit of a dangerous moment in the back, for sure, for Finland. But in terms of the game plan of forcing play to go through Zuba to do anything in the attacking areas, I think that went right according to plan. And Finland was playing for a clean sheet, either a draw or perhaps, nick one on the counter. And Finland is fairly decent on the counter. I don't want to say we're good on the counter, but we certainly are decent on the counter. And over the course of the game, I think that it was a fairly even game. I know Russia won it, and yeah, Russia had certainly more control in the first half. In the second half, Finland actually had more possession than Russia did, just by a little bit. So on the balance of play, Russia had a little bit more of control of the game, but I would still say it was a very even game. Of course, there was the goal chalked off from Poyampalo that was marked off for offside, which was a very marginal decision, VAR decision. That very easily could have been the opener, and then Finland would have defended even more deep and forced even more, Russia to try to be more creative to break them down. And there were a few other opportunities for Finland over the course of the game. I know Pukki didn't have really any clear opportunities other than perhaps the one that he shot straight at Safonov. But Poyampalo had a couple of opportunities. There was a few dangerous-looking balls in the box. But overall, I think that the balance of play was about even, with just the difference being a moment of brilliance from Miranchuk, who ended up completely disappearing off the face of the earth after that goal. But that goal really was a moment of brilliance, and that, for me, was really the only thing that separated the two sides today.
Yeah, that's fair. I can't disagree. Finland were once Poyan scored that opener, I lost it. I was like, oh come on, this is going to be another one of those games where Russia might get battered, and it's over, the Euros are over. But thankfully, it got chalked off. And I mean, Russia were obviously better than the Belgium game because they ended up winning. Artem, what did you think of the match from the Russia perspective?
Yeah, I completely agree that it was a really close game. Like Finland's goal, the one that got rolled offside. I was thinking the same as you, Hanu. I thought when that goal went in, okay, this is game over. I think this is our tournament over even. Because Russia don't tend to be very good at breaking down teams who are very defensive, especially when it's just Zuba up front. Um, so that was a nightmare, but luckily enough, like you said, it got chalked off, and I think from then on it was a very close game. Russia probably just about edged it for me. Maybe that's my bias coming in, but that goal from Miranchuk was just absolutely fantastic. I was interested actually that when Zhumaletinov came on in the second half, I
Yeah,
thought that he actually played quite well, even though he didn't get that many minutes. Um, and I'm kind of thinking that maybe, you know, going into the Denmark game, he might be better off starting than Zuba. Because Zuba, for me, although he won a lot of the aerial duels, he didn't do that much.
yeah.
Like, he was able to hold up some play, but chances really didn't go through him in the game. So I think maybe it could be a shout to put someone else up there.
May I butt in for a second? Um,
Yeah, go
Of
on.
yeah,
course.
so I mean, I agree. I think that Zuba is a fantastic player, talismanic player. I, unlike a lot of people, think that there certainly still is a place for him in the national team. I know a lot of people are thinking that his time has passed. I disagree with that take entirely. The issue with him is that you need a bit more speed on the flanks, and Russia doesn't really bring that. And so basically the only tactic, and this is what I was talking about in terms of things getting stale, is Russia for the past World Cup was predicated basically on, counterattacks and perhaps lumping the ball up to Zuba's head and hoping that he could hold the ball up and play people off of him. And in the last World Cup, it worked, but it hasn't really worked for the last year. Now, I liked the selection today of having Miranchuk and Golovin playing next to each other. I do think that that is part of the answer for Russia going forward. Those two need to link up better than they did today, but they need to get that time next to each other. But other than that interplay between those two, I think Russia, in order for Zuba to make sense against, I guess, deeper lying teams, particularly, uh, you need to have a little bit more coming off of him, running past him, and that's why having people like Makarov coming on might have been a nice change of pace. Somebody that just has speed and dribbling ability that would be able to come off of Zuba. And I also just want to give a shout out to Sobolev, who came. I thought he was very good in the last. He only played the last 10 minutes or so, which was including stoppage time. I
Yeah.
thought he was really good today. He was in those 10 minutes. I thought he held up the ball really well. He was finding some good positions, winning aerial balls, basically everything that you would have expected Zuba to do. But he just looked a little bit more sharp than Zuba did today. Of course, playing against tired legs and only playing for 10 minutes, but it's worth giving him a shout out. I thought that he was quite good in that limited time today.
My issue with Zuba playing up front, it's not that I think that his time at the national team is over. I think far from it. I think that he can continue to play for the national team for 3-4 years still. But when you're playing against a team who, you know, is not the favourites against Russia, when Russia are the favourites in a match, the teams tend to focus on, oh, look, there's Zuba, he's the big man, he's going to be the one that we need to take out of the game. And he's not the hardest player to take out of the game. If you can get, maybe two centre backs on
Mm-hmm.
him, you can pretty much eliminate any threat that he has. And like you said, because there's not fast wingers around either, it makes it a lot more difficult to, kind of capitalize on attacks. So it's from that perspective that I was thinking that maybe Zuba would have been better off maybe coming off earlier. Maybe Sobolev comes on, maybe Zhumaletinov goes up front, and we kind of play a midfield front three or something like that. But yeah, it's it's definitely something that needs to be looked into. Um, I agree with you that the link up between Golovin and Miranchuk was great, and you can clearly see that the way they were moving across. Like there was a few moments throughout the game where Russia were on the attack just outside of Finland's box, and you can see the link up between those two. And at times Kuzayev, it was fantastic. You could see that there was space being made, even though it didn't look like there could
Hmm.
be. And that's definitely something I'm looking forward to seeing more.
Kuzyaev is worth a shout out too. I thought he was really good today, and particularly compared to uh, Zhirkov, who, yeah, he looked all of 37 in the last round. So Kuzyaev, I think, is definitely worth a shout out as well in terms of somebody who performed admirably. And I thought Diveyev was also quite decent today, despite a few ricks here and there. I thought overall it was kind of surprising that he wasn't the one starting against Belgium. Just he's I don't know. To me, I thought I would have started him, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not the manager of the team.
Yeah, I mean, we've been
Absolutely.
saying for a while that we'd like to see Deveyev and Evgeniev over Kudryashov and Semyonov and those geriatrics, so to say.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, a couple of things. I thought Rifat looked very bright when he came on. He missed two good chances, and
Mm.
he also scuffled a few things. He scuffed a few things. But I thought overall that's a pretty good debut for him. If it was his, I think it was his Euro debut at least. But the only thing I was thinking of when Zuba was sort of getting bullied, or he wasn't being able to do as much, is why is Fedor Smolov not in this team? Because you bring him on and the game is entirely different. He can link up perfectly with Golovin and Miranchuk, and we've talked about it before on the podcast. But I just don't see why Zabolotny was called up. He's not even the second choice now. Clearly, Cherchesov trusts Sobolev over Zabolotny, but like I really would have liked to see Fedor Smolov in this team, and I hope he gets his chance at the next World Cup. Hope he can keep it up.
Yeah, you're spot on, Hanu. I think that Smolov definitely would have changed things today, and like I didn't even think of the option of even having him in the squad, obviously because he didn't get called up. But I do think that he would have changed the game somewhat today. Now, luckily, we didn't need that much of a changing. Obviously, we won the game in the end, but it is definitely something that needs to be considered not only for, you know, after this tournament, but for the next World Cup and for all the games in between. But Henry, I wanted to ask you actually. We've been talking about. Well, you mentioned that football kind of goes in cycles, and whenever a manager can't take a team to the next level, that's when he should move on. Um, so the question I wanted to ask was, who would you bring in place of Cherchesov? Because the way I look at it is, the last few Russia managers have been awful, and finally you've gotten someone who's gotten in here, say stabilize the team. When we had Slutsky back in 2016, sure, we were all good going forward, but we got killed at the back. And I feel like our defense is not strong enough to survive without a really good defensive tactician. And I think, a lot of people trash on the three at the back that Cherchesov plays, but clearly he sees that, like we saw it against Belgium, we played two centre backs there, and look how badly that went. And we changed to a three at the back in the second half. I don't think that there's enough experience. I don't think there's enough quality in there to play two centre backs. I think that we should continue playing this way. And although it might not get the best out of Miranchuk and Golovin and maybe the other attacking players, I think that on balance, this is close to as good as we'll get at the moment. But I want to hear your thoughts on that and who you would bring in as a manager and who you think would take Russia to the next level.
I mean, I agree that Russia, as things currently stand, I mean, I hate to use the word needs, but I would say that a back three is certainly what suits Russia best. Um, we've seen them try a back four off and on over the course of the past few years, and it rarely works out very well. I do think that if Cherchesov could evolve somewhat in terms of his selection, in terms of the tactics beyond the back three. I'm just talking, selection and kind of gameplay tactics rather than formational changes. I think that he could squeak out a few more years as the manager of the Russian national team, but I haven't seen that happen in the last couple of years. Now, in terms of who I would like to see take his place, I mean, it's hard to say. There's not a whole lot of depth in terms of Russian managers. Um, of course, looking foreign is always an option, an attractive option. Um, in terms of who you could get, it's hard to say. Uh, who you would be able to tempt to come to the Russian national team. I wouldn't go for a big name manager like they've tried in the past. Tried to lure different big name managers in the past. They've rarely worked out in terms of the national team or even in club teams in the Premier League, the Russian Premier League, that is. I think that if we're going to look domestically in terms of Russian coaches, I think that somebody like Fedotov at Sochi could be an interesting choice. He hasn't been in the job for forever. He's only been there for about a year and a half right now. Basically a full season and just a little bit more, with a team that's had a lot of squad turnover since he's been there. So a lot of players that haven't played together before, uses the back three a lot, overperforms given the squad that he has. I mean, that's a lot of the things that you might want in the Sbornaya, is somebody who has players that don't get to see each other a lot. In his case, it was players that are being shuffled into a squad who haven't been there before. In the national team, of course, it's players that are normally at their club teams. Somebody who plays a back three, which I agree with you, is kind of what Russia, is most comfortable with, and is, if they want to beat bigger teams, is what they're going to have to try to persist with. And I think that they play decent football. I mean, Sochi was a very entertaining watch last year. Does Russia have somebody who can take the place of Christian Noboa to the level that he is? Maybe Golovin, if he played a little bit deeper, could have kind of more of that. He's obviously a completely different player, but somebody that would be talismanic like that, would be able to set up goals, score the odd goal. It might be an interesting selection, but I think that probably you're looking foreign in terms of managers, and it's just hard for me to say who would be a good selection out of the whole world. Where do you even start looking?
Yeah, that's a good point, and Fedotov is actually an interesting shout. Hanu's gonna love you for that one. He's been singing his praises for the whole year, but the one thing I'd be very wary of is, sure, he's had a fantastic season at Sochi. Like you said, he's overperformed, but do we want someone who's overperformed for one season? I don't know if that's something that I'd be willing to risk the national team.
Mm.
If he has another great season at Sochi, maybe does decent in Europe, then I'd be willing to consider. But for the moment, I just, like you said, it's so difficult to choose from the world. But if you're looking domestically, it's very difficult to see a manager who's going to take over from Cherchesov and actually do better. Hanu, I already know who you're going to say, but you might outline to the audience who you think should take over in the Russian national team and why.
Yeah, you said I would be excited at Fedotov, but I'm for the Russian national team. I'm not, mainly because I feel like all of Henry's points are extremely valid, but I just feel like Fedotov is way too much of a system merchant with his 3-4-3, so that he's like Kuban Berdiev. So he'll try to shoehorn players, and I don't know if he'll be able to get the best out of a lot of players. I think you want someone that's flexible. Even though, you never know. Fedotov, they got drawn against some Azerbaijani club today in the Conference League, so he might switch things up for the next season. You don't know. But I would go with Sergei Semak, of course. It makes a lot of sense. Zenit would benefit from a new manager, a foreign manager, to take them to the next level. That squad needs a fair bit of work. And I just think that Semak has what it takes to resonate with a lot of players. He's very respected. From what we know, he's a decent guy. The squad atmosphere at Zenit under him has been exceptional. And a lot of players have come up under his tutelage and gone to the Russian national team. So I think that would be my bet. Artem disagrees with me, and why do you disagree with me, Artem?
I just don't think that he's defensively sound enough, tactic-wise. Like I've been saying this whole time, I don't think that Russia is the kind of team that you can kind of neglect the defense and kind of let it do its own thing. You've got to really, really manage that defense, and Semac's not the guy for that. Like, he's shown it in the Champions League, he's shown it in the Europa League. Just it's not good enough. I think that he's definitely going to be the, like, if I was to bet my money on a manager taking over from Cherchesov, it would be him. But
You just don't want to see
I just
it.
don't know how successful it would be. Like, ideally, what I'd be looking at is, like, someone who's as defensively, tactically sound as Cherchesov, as someone who's, like, really, really riling the players up and making sure that they focus at the back. And then someone who also allows players to be themselves and create up front, like Slutsky. Like, we all know Leonid Slutsky is, you know, I'd actually argue that he's the best player, the best manager in football management. He's unbelievable what he does with young players, how he brings them through, how he gives them confidence, how he lets them play, and that's what I want to see in the Russia squad. And it's a shame that his tenure as the Russian manager didn't work out, but it was for that same reason that I think Semak wouldn't, because it was just tactically, defensively all over the place. Like, when we played against Slovakia at the Euros and Wales, we got killed by players that just aren't that good. Like, we got absolutely killed, and it was embarrassing to watch. And even Slutsky himself just, like, said we're shit. Like, it's difficult for me to think that any manager would do better in Cherchesov's position right now. And I know I've been just harping on about this for not even weeks now. It's been months. But it's just how I feel. I feel like if there's a manager who can come in and allow the attack to be a bit more creative, but also hold the stability that we have at the back, that's who I want in. But I just don't see that in Samak.
Can I briefly address both Slutsky and Simak in terms
Sure.
of for the Russian national team? So you're absolutely right about Slutsky's last tenure as the Russian national team manager in terms of the defense being really shaky. I actually think that Slutsky's evolved as a manager in many ways. So when he was at CSKA, he had a very set defense when he came in, and he was effective at organizing that defense that already knew what they were doing, and we know how successful he was there. At the national team level, it didn't work out. At Hull City, now when he came to Rubin, we had a good defensive record when he came in because we had everybody defending. I mean, our goal output was absolutely atrocious. I mean,
was.
really, really disgustingly bad. And, some of that was because we just didn't have the personnel up front. But some of it was because we were defending so deep. I mean, we had 10 men back the whole time and had, Evgeny Markov trying to win one-on-one balls at midfield and carry the team forward himself before Slutsky came in. And needless to say, that didn't work very well. Slutsky came in and, yeah, we still set up somewhat defensively, particularly against the bigger teams. We do sit a little bit deep against the big teams, but we're able to counterattack out of that, and we're not sitting as deep. And he's taken a partnership of Starfelt and Urimovic, who are each decent defenders in their own right, and Begic came in at the end of the season, also a decent defender in his own right. But if you look at our defensive record, it's really good if you exclude Urimovic's one rash challenge that he has every single game. And I mean this in the nicest way possible. I love Urimovic. He's one of my favorite players. But every single game, if you watch Rubin games from beginning to end, there's always one challenge that you have no idea what he's doing. And the rest of the game, he's generally pretty flawless. But there's always one challenge somewhere that it'll concede a penalty, it'll concede a free kick right on the edge of the box. And Starfelt, on the other hand, was absolutely amazing this season, other than the fact that he has so many handballs in the box, some of which were, weird VAR decisions where the hand was by his side and it got kicked up into his hand. But a lot of the time he just jumps with his arms up and it ends up clattering off his arm, and we've had a bunch of penalties called against us in that way. So if you exclude the handballs from Starfelt and the goals that we've given up from Urimovic's one random strange challenge game, our defensive record is really good, and we're not playing as defensively in the past. I think that Slutsky's actually gotten a lot out of that defense. But you can't have him. Sorry to say, I'm keeping him at Rubin. Not available. I know I have no power in this decision, but I'm saying right now, no chance.
Honestly, I'd prefer him to stay at Rubin for the moment as well. What he's done with
Oh,
that
it's so
club over
fun.
the
Yes.
course of this
It's
season,
so fun.
it's so fun. I
They,
can't wait to watch them in Europe as well.
yeah, we talk a lot about the rebrand Rubin have had over since he joined. They were by far the most boring club in Russia when he joined, and since then he's made them arguably the most exciting club. They keep going from strength to strength. They've already signed Ramirez and Haksabanovic, who are both really highly rated. They're already replacing a few of their players, and I'm just super excited to see how they're going to do in Europe. But Artem, I do have a name for you for the Russia job. Can you guess who it is?
Like outside of Samak.
Yes.
Can you like hang on? So I take it right. He's a current manager and he's not Russian. That's what I'm gonna guess, right?
Okay.
And no, you know what? There's actually way too many people. I feel like you're gonna say Nikolic.
No, I'm gonna say Ivica Olic.
Go away. You've actually just ruined my whole day. But we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, we will talk about that.
For
Yeah,
well, we may as well
introduce
just
us
talk
because
about it now.
he was your favorite manager. So introduce
Right.
us.
So Olic joined CSKA replacing Goncharenko. It was what just after the winter break, maybe 2 games after or so. And in the video when he joined, when he was addressing the squad, he looked like a shy kid moving to a new school, trying to introduce himself in front of the class. He didn't look like the manager who's going to take them to the next level, or keep them at the level they were at all. As it says on the screen right now, he earned 13 points out of 9 games, which is for CSK standards absolutely awful. And he's been sacked now by. They say that there's a mutual decision there, but he's sacked.
Yeah,
he's
that's the funny
so
thing.
bad.
He's awful. He's awful, and I think he's gonna go back to Croatia, be the assistant manager or something. But CSK are such a meme these days. They don't know what they're doing. So the thing was, apparently Olic got called into the club like a night before this happened, and he was like, "Okay, I'm just coming in to do the training or whatever, meet the club." And then in the morning, he found out that he was going to get sacked, so he quickly had to prepare like a resignation and some words and stuff. But he's gone, and I just wanna he just managed 9 games for CSK, right? And I want to tell you what all of those 9 games were. He only won 4 of
Please
those.
do.
So he beat Tambov, first game, beat Arsenal Tula. Both of them he beat 2-1, right? And these are clubs that were in the bottom 4. Then he beat Rotor. Then he lost to Sochi, lost to Lokomotiv 3-0, lost to Spartak, drew to Ufa, beat Krasnodar, who are basically a relegation club. They're not an actual football club. We know how bad they were in 2021. And then he lost to Dinamo. This man was properly awful.
If there was any trophy he was gonna win with CSK, it was gonna be the FNL.
Exactly. It was
Like
yeah,
it was just terrible.
exactly. And even then he'd probably finish second to Orenburg. But
Yeah.
But it seems that Alexei Berezutsky has taken the charge now, and they've got a man from Kazakhstan, Grigory Babayan, who was Tobol Kostanay manager, and he's done pretty well. Really good manager, right? But for a club like CSK, they need actual managers and not chances and not ex-legends. But what do you think, man, Artem? Where do CSK go from here?
Oh, they don't get into Europe next season. That's for sure.
Right.
I feel like this is going to be a real bad transitionary period for them. Vlasic wants to leave. I'm not sure there's going to be many players who want to join. Clearly they don't have any European competition to play in this year.
Yeah.
So I think it's just going to be rough. Like ideally, I think that they'd hope to bring in someone like. You're gonna hate me again for this, Henry, but they'd love to bring Slutsky back, but I don't think Slutsky's going
They
back. I
tried.
can't
I think
imagine it happening.
they tried, and he said no.
Yeah, see, that doesn't surprise me. I feel like it's just past it. Like, I'm glad that Slutsky said no as well, if that is the case.
Yeah.
I think that CSK are just gonna have an awful time for a couple of seasons before coming back. Like, so that's the only way I can see it. Like, I'm willing to be proven wrong. I just don't think Berezutski's gonna be, um, the manager they need.
A bit of news in terms of you just mentioned. So I'm kind of tying two disparate threads together here. You mentioned that they'd love Slutsky back. I agree, and I think that he'd do great there as he did last time. But I feel pretty confident that Slutsky's not going anywhere right now. And here's just a pitch for any Russian-speaking listeners that we have. Rubin's Russian social media manager is leaving his post to join Spartak to become their social media manager.
Yes.
And so the position for Russian language social media manager for Rubin is now open. I don't speak Russian, otherwise I'd probably be applying myself. That's a paid position, unlike my current position, which is all volunteer, just as a fan of the club. But the reason that I'm saying that Slutsky, I'm fairly sure, has no plans of going anywhere, at least for the time being. In addition to how fun everything is in Kazan and how fun everything seems to be at the club, and he's certainly central to that. The final stage of the process of applying for the position of social media manager at Rubin is an interview one-on-one with Slutsky for him to him to grill the potential social media managers. Now, does that sound like somebody who's planning on leaving the club? It doesn't to me. If the manager is going to be grilling candidates for social media manager, it seems like he's trying to ingrain himself in the culture of this club almost. Find somebody that has his same temperament, his same ethos. I mean, maybe I'm reading a bit too much into this, but what do you think about that?
I think that is absolutely amazing. I did not know that, and that's honestly,
it was just announced yesterday.
Everywhere that Slutsky goes, the one thing that everyone says is that he completely changes the culture.
Yeah.
Like, if you see Hull fans, even though he did terribly there, they adore him. They absolutely love that man. In Vitesse as well, they love him as well. Like, this man, he just brightens up everyone's day. And I'm upset to hear that the social media manager's gone. I assume that that's the same guy who thought of all these videos
No,
and songs for Slutsky
it's
to
their
sing.
it's not the main guy. It's the guy below the main guy, I guess.
Okay, well that's good then, because I've really been enjoying Rubin's content recently, and I would hate to see that go.
Oh,
But it's
I
great-
wouldn't
it's great
expect it to
see
change
that.
too much.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, don't worry about that. We're gonna have plenty of fun stuff coming out from the club still.
Good.
Honestly, man, David Sensen. Everybody knows David Sensen. He's the only other Rubin fan on Twitter apart from Henry. He would have been salivating over that if he spoke Russian. And to be fair, Henry,
Rumor has it he's already signed up to an intensive language course.
exactly on Football Manager. But Henry, I'm gonna ask you for a David-related favor, right? And it's no secret that David has the best eye for footballing talent out of anyone on Russian football Twitter. He
That's
discovered
fair.
Sardar Azmoun in 2012.
Yeah.
Okay, he like, you go through his Twitter, you find gems. He keeps sending us them, right? It's amazing, right? And
Yeah, you know what though, Hanu? David's always been like for a long time he didn't really brag about all his finds, and now like almost every week me and Hanu get a message being like, here's one of my tweets from 2017, and it's some
Exactly.
player who's just made a massive step up from like
Exactly.
the third Russian tier up to the Russian Premier League.
Yeah,
exactly.
why
And I also,
it wouldn't surprise me if David, and I love David, by the way, and he knows that, so I mean this all in good spirit. It wouldn't surprise me if David had a tweet from like 2012 saying that Zakarian was going to be the next big thing, when he was like 4 years old or something like that.
Exactly,
Like,
yeah.
this kid is going to be the next big thing for Russian football. Wouldn't really surprise me all that much.
yeah, no, David discovered Sobolev. David discovers a lot of people, and that's why, Henry, I'm officially asking you, right? Man, you gotta do something to make David an analyst or a scout at Rubin. Gotta do something, man. And I'm telling you, he would love that. And I know that it's like Rubin, they had an article where it was like the scouting team right now is pretty small. It's Cesar Navas,
Yep.
Leonid Slutsky, and a couple of analysts. But man, for the culture, you got to do something. We got to see David at Rubin. It would make his day, month, year, everything. And whenever you come to Ireland, India, or England because of David, the whole country would be yours. You don't have to worry about any of that. But
Do you know what? There's actually nothing that would make me happier than seeing David
exactly.
in the Rubin scouting team. Genuinely.
And he'd do so well, you already know. Like, the scouting team is already great, but he would elevate that. So, yeah, man, that's our little request to you.
Oh,
And
I'll do what I can. I have very little power here. Like I said, I do this as a volunteer. I basically just hit up the club
yeah,
one day and was like, your English language Twitter account is a bit more dormant than I'd like for my purposes.
yeah,
You want me to take that over? And they were like, sure, take it. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. So I have very little actual power at the club. I'm mostly just,
yeah.
like support. But yeah, you're right. I think David would do a really great job as a scout at the club, and I'd happily be his assistant or whatever. If the club wants to pay me to do something, that would be ideal.
Of course.
Henry, I wouldn't worry about the request too much. This is
Yeah,
not the most outrageous thing that Hanu's asked. He
yeah.
has made a formal request for Arshavin to come on the show. And unfortunately, Arshavin wasn't happy to speak English for that long, but maybe one day.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
No, but
I
I
know
do respect.
Hanu's a bit bold, but we love it nonetheless.
You gotta try, man.
Look, if you don't ask, you don't
Yeah,
get.
exactly.
Hanu's dead right.
You gotta try. But no, I do respect Ruben for just, like you hit them up one day and they said yes. Like, more clubs need to be doing that, especially when you look at how some of their social media accounts are run. Dinamo, CSKA, big clubs like that, and it's quite sad. But moving on back to football, we don't have too much to discuss in terms of transfers or whatever. But the Euros, right? We've got to discuss a bit more about the Euros and how they're going, not from a Russia perspective, not from. But actually, let's do that first. Artem, are Russia making it out the group?
Yes.
So,
And I say that because I think that we'll at least get the third place spot. I think that against Denmark, we will get a draw minimum. That's going to be my call, and we're going to get out the group. And I also hope that Finland get out the group because that would be really cool.
yeah,
But that's my prediction.
right. We want Belgium to win tomorrow, and we want Russia to
We
be.
want Belgium to win. We want Belgium to win all 3 games.
Yes. Henry, what about you? How do you think? Do you think Finland are going to make it?
I think that Finland. So I think that all Finland, Russia, Denmark are going to finish on 3 points. And as somebody that is rooting for Russia as well, it pains me to say that I do think that they're going to lose to Denmark. Denmark really coming into the tournament, I thought were a very strong. Dark horse contender in terms of making a run in the tournament. Not to win it, but to go pretty deep in the tournament. They had quite the squad. And of course, Finland won because, in large part, because of the whole Christian Eriksen situation and the players basically being metaphorically held at gunpoint and told, play or else, either today or tomorrow morning. But either way, they weren't going to be in the right frame of mind. Now, Eriksen's out, and that's a lot of creativity out, but I still think Denmark's a really, really strong team, and I just have the feeling that they're going to win one for Christian Eriksen, and I don't see that coming against Belgium. I know that it's a really bad reason to say that I see a team winning a game, but because I believe that the tiebreaker is head-to-head record, I think that Russia is going to, well, I guess all 3 of those teams then would have. Yeah, I don't know what the tiebreaker would be. I think all 3 of those teams will finish on 3 points, and if they all have the same head-to-head, I think it'll come down to goal differential.
Which is not good for us.
Which is not good for you unless
At least for the moment.
unless Belgium batters both Finland and Denmark, which is certainly a possibility. So it's hard to say. If I'm just picking cards out of a hat right now and putting them 1, 2, 3, 4, I would say Belgium, Finland, Russia, Denmark.
Right.
Just because I think Belgium could really batter Denmark. I just get the feeling that that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's fair to be. I wouldn't. I don't really disagree with you. I think it's really hard to predict what Russia will do against Denmark. A draw would be good, obviously, but then I don't know, man. It's
It's
really hard to
hard.
predict,
It's a
especially
tough
yeah.
it's a tough thing.
It's pretty tough. Um, Speaking of Italy, who are your joint first team,
Yeah.
they're one of the teams I've been most impressed by at the tournament so far. Although Turkey are pretty shocking, they got hammered by Wales. Now I'll admit, like many other people, I had Turkey down as my dark horses for this tournament, and I was wrong. A lot of people were wrong. I was one of them. They got hammered by Wales. But for me so far, Italy, Belgium, France, and maybe the Netherlands have been, no, not the Netherlands, Portugal, sorry. Italy, France, Portugal have been the best teams for me. And I think we're going to see another France versus Portugal final if I had to make a bet, if I had to make that prediction. But Artem, what do you think? Who are your favorites for this tournament? Who have you been impressed by? Who have you not been impressed by?
You know, it's hard to disagree with your three there. To be honest, I'm not sure about Belgium though. I don't think that they're gonna go on and win it.
Yeah.
Italy have been impressive. I'm looking forward to watching their match tonight. Actually,
Yeah.
just looking through the other teams now. Like, yeah, I think two of them right there, Portugal and France, and Italy are definitely the teams. I do also want to give a shout out to Ukraine because although they did lose,
Yeah.
they came back from 2-0 to 2-all against the Netherlands, which is no easy feat. And I think that they'll get out of the groups, and I think they might surprise some other people as well. And I hope they do.
I would
agree
have
with you.
I would have echoed your sentiment on Ukraine, and I do appreciate that they came back from 2-0 down to equalize before losing. I do think that they can and probably will get out of this group. Austria has a very bad record in Euros. I just think that part of the reason that Ukraine was able to get back into that game is Frank de Boer is the Netherlands manager. I think that he's a bit of a clown of a manager. I I don't rate him at all. I mean, he was good when he was managing in the Netherlands at the club level. Everything since then has been an absolute disaster, complete disaster, and a lot of his comments just make it sound like he doesn't have anything between his ears. So, I'm not sure how. Yeah, I know I'm being harsh here, but I mean it seriously. I mean, I've heard plenty of his press conferences and whatnot. His time in the United States was a disaster. I mean, he's just been, of course, Crystal Palace, complete disaster. I'm gonna say that I'm a bit skeptical of how impressed I should be about Ukraine coming from 2-0 back against the Frank de Boer team. If they impress me against Austria, then I might say, yeah, I could see them making a run in the tournament. But until that game, I'm not sure that I can have a lot of confidence in what that Netherlands result meant.
That's
That's a fair point.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, so tomorrow they're playing against North Macedonia, so that should be a win for them. And then obviously, like you said, the Austria one is the big one where you can kind of really gauge what level they're at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Artem, I think we've ran through everything. Or have we?
I think we have.
We have, right?
I'm pretty sure we have.
Let me just mention Italy for a brief second, since I haven't gotten to mention them at all. Italy, I think it's cliche. Everybody was saying that Italy is one of those dark horse teams. Nobody's talking about them, but people have been saying that so much that now everybody is talking about them. They haven't lost a game in their last 28. I believe that their last loss was in 2018, like October 2018 or something like that. It was forever ago. And the performance against Turkey, Turkey is turning out to be very disappointing. Their wall of meat is more like, minced meat. For those who are listening who don't know what I'm talking about, the wall of meat, that was their vaunted defense. It's like the Turkish version of parking the bus is the Turkish wall of meat. Really, they're not looking anything like what anybody was anticipating. But the Italy performance was very impressive, and that's the kind of a performance that Italy's been putting out. A lot of people still have that stereotypical view of Italy as get a headed goal from a tall striker early on. Maybe they know, Immobile's not a tall striker that wins a lot of headers, but you get the point. They nick a goal, and then they set up shop. Chiellini, Bonucci, everybody drops deep. They're defending with 8 men, and they hold on for a 1-0 victory. That's not how Italy's played under Mancini at any time during his tenure. They're very attacking, and the midfield particularly is a ball of energy. They don't. It's not like previous Italy teams where the midfield moves the ball pretty well in the beginning of the game. They get their goal, and then everybody is defending like their lives depend on it. Chiellini and Bonucci are defending like their lives depend on it, but even when they're up by 2, the midfield is still flying around full of energy and looking for more goals. So I think that Italy, even though a lot of people at this point know that Italy hasn't lost in 28, and that Italy in tournaments, the last few World Cups notwithstanding, Italy in tournaments is always a force to be reckoned with. I think that while people may be expecting Italy to do something, I think that they could surprise a lot of people in how they do it. I think that the style that Italy plays is going to impress people more than the fact that Italy has a strong team again. Now, of course, this prediction is going to end up blowing up in my face because that just is, it's what happens. But, people, if you haven't watched Italy recently, they're a very, very fun team to watch and have been for a couple years now.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's just because of, them being managed by Mancini that I still don't fully believe them. His stint at Zenit really, soured my taste for him. Let's just say it that way. But, yeah, like Italy have been fantastic, like you said, for the last 2 or 3 years now. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them go very far in the tournament and maybe even take it home. That would be a really, really interesting way for the tournament to end. And like I said, in 50 minutes they're playing, and I can't wait to watch them.
Yeah, football's a funny game, isn't it? Man who finished 5th with Zenit, his on such a run. But no, honestly, Italy I have a soft spot for because Euro 2012 was the first international tournament I watched, and Mario Balotelli in that tournament, I love Mario Balotelli so much that it really infuriates me when people compare any striker with a bad attitude to Mario Balotelli, because Mario Balotelli is supremely talented footballer, right? That's disrespectful. But that entire team in the 2012 Euros, I was rooting for them. I was actually in Spain for the final of the Euros. I was in Barcelona watching that, and I cried when Italy lost. So that's where I was, and I support Real Madrid. It made no sense. It still makes no sense, but that was how far I was into Italy at the 2012 Euros, right? So
I honestly thought when you were gonna say when people compare Mario Balotelli, I always tell them not to, because every bad striker or every striker with a bad attitude is compared to him. You can't compare them to him because he's got the worst attitude.
No, see, don't do that, right? But what people do, right, is any player, they'll score 5 goals in a season, they'll be promising for a bit. People compare Ivan Ignatieff to Mario Balotelli. Don't do that, right? Mario Balotelli, if he was a serious footballer, Mario Balotelli would be on that Aguero, Ibra, Lewandowski level.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wouldn't remember this, but back in let's say FIFA 06, FIFA 08, all those kind of games when Mario Balotelli would be 17, 18, his potential was 95 or something in every single one of those games, because everyone could see that he was clearly talented. When he played for Inter Milan, he was, even at a very young age, one of their best players.
Yeah.
But it is a massive shame to see the way his career has gone after such a promising start. But it's undoubtable that his head's not always in it.
There's another thing just on the Balotelli front for a second. When people compare strikers, particularly with bad attitudes, to Balotelli, it rings hollow because people don't know Balotelli's background. And I think that informs a lot of why he has this bad attitude. And he has a bad attitude. That's not debatable. I'm not trying to excuse his bad attitude. I'm saying that his bad attitude is understandable based on his background. He is the child of, I believe, Ghanaian refugees to Italy who had to give him up to foster care because they couldn't afford his health care expenses when he was like 2 or 3 years old. He was adopted by Holocaust survivors, grew up in a very, poor and rough neighborhood in a very racist area. He wasn't allowed to be considered Italian until he was 18, and even then, there was Italian fans who would deny his claims to Italian citizenship after he had Italian citizenship. His background is very traumatic, and I don't want to say that it excuses it in any way. I mean, his attitude. If he had a good attitude, I really think that he could have gone right to the very top. But it does inform why he has that attitude. And I think that just saying any player with a bad attitude is the same as any player with a bad attitude is really unhelpful for understanding these players as people. And people just need to read more on his background. They need to read more in terms of psychological works. Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth is one that I always tell people to read. That, of course, deals more with colonialism than, perhaps traumatic childhoods more generally, but you get the idea. And so I just would be remiss to not mention that he did have an incredibly tough childhood that could go some way in explaining why he has the attitude that he has, whereas a lot of other players, and you named a few, that have similarly bad attitudes.
Yeah, they just don't care enough.
They
have no,
there's no excuse. I mean, and I'm not excusing Balotelli's attitude, but they don't even have that justification, I guess you could say, or that reasoning behind their bad attitude. That's all I want to say on that front.
Yeah, I think even with Balotelli, right, I think history will always look at Balotelli with a positive light because of not only the way he came up from a lot of difficulties, but because he gave us so many iconic moments. That celebration at the 2012 Euros, it will be remembered forever. And he seemed like the stuff he said on and off the pitch, some of his gimmicks, some of his, he just seems like he's having fun with life. He seems like he's having a good time. He's never really come out and said that, I regret this or I regret that. And it's just fine, man. It doesn't matter if you didn't become the best striker in football history. If you're having fun, you made it far, have fun with it. It doesn't have to be that competitive all the time.
And as you said, he's had a lot of really iconic and fun moments in his career, even though, for example, Aguero, who laid on Aguero for that?
Exactly, yeah, Balotelli.
I believe
his only assist
it was his,
for Manchester City, by the way.
Exactly, I was just about to say that. It was his only assist, but he was there. He was the one that set that up. And, his career, it's not what we were hoping it would have been, but he does have those moments. And, whether or not history will look back on him kindly or not is debatable. I don't think that it's going to be kind to him, and I think that racism is a big part of that. I think that if he had a traumatic childhood and he was white and had some of those iconic moments, that history would look back kindly on him. And I'm thinking of someone like Paul Gascoigne, for example. Yeah, he's kind of a joke because of, his public intoxication and things like that. And I don't mean I see him as a joke. I mean the press makes him out to be a joke. But fans love Gaza. I love him, and even the people that make fun of him for being drunk in public or high in public or whatever, they all love him anyway. But I don't know if Balotelli's ever going to have that, even though he didn't have, the public, he didn't hit someone with a car when he was drunk, etc., etc. Balotelli just had a bad attitude, but I think that racism is going to play a big part in how his legacy is viewed, and it's unfortunate, but I just think it's true.
Yeah, that would.
You know what? I think you're absolutely right, and I know we're going back a little bit, but I think you're right in saying that we do need to distinguish players who have clearly gone through, a lot of childhood trauma and, have grown up in not the best situations compared to, say, for example, Ivan Ignatieff, who is kind of like a spoiled flat attitude rather than, you get what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it is definitely a shame, and I do think racism will play some kind of part in it, and it's upsetting that some people will deny that, because You know, like you said, Paul Gascoigne, like he, as fantastic of a player as he was, he is, I'd argue, more of an idiot off the pitch than Balotelli was.
I agree.
And you know, so
But people love him.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be considered. And honestly, I hadn't even thought of it in that light, but you're 100% right.
Yeah, exactly. He is. He's completely spot on, and it is eye opening. It is quite eye opening, and we see it a lot. To be fair, with like there was stuff on Calvin Phillips yesterday, how the media is treating him despite his great performance for England. It's just
Yeah.
it never ends with the media and how scummy they can be.
Raheem Sterling.
Or even just the thing that was in like one of the most recent things that we've seen in mainly English media, obviously with Foden being compared to, you know, Gascoigne of whatever year it was that
Yeah.
he had his unbelievable Euros tournament, and then like, you know, there were all these, you know, media outlets, Sky, BBC, The Sun, everyone was publishing things about Foden, about his new hair. But then, like, anytime you see something about Pogba getting new hair, it's never in that light. It's always, oh, like, why does he spend so much time in the barber shop and so little time on the training pitch? You know?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
And certain ex-managers and ex-players in the media feed into that for sure. And I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. I mean, anytime that you mention Pogba and somebody criticizing him, you know
Yeah,
exactly who I'm talking about.
It
But
it comes to
the same man who allowed Ali Dia to have a career.
yes, exactly. But for example, Sterling, and I'm sorry to keep digressing, but Sterling scores the game-winning goal against Croatia. Yeah, it wasn't a great game for England. This talking about in this Euros. Sterling scores the only goal in that game. What's one of the questions he's asked after the end of the game? Did you do enough to justify your selection in the starting lineup? You know, he had a shaky end of the season for Manchester City. That's not debatable, but Southgate, the manager for England, selected him. He scores the game-winning goal, the only goal in the game, and
Yeah.
one of the questions that the journalist asks him after the game is, did you justify your selection? How else do you justify your selection as an attacking player? I mean, yeah, you can have a good game without scoring the goal, but if you score the only goal in the game, you kind of justified your selection. And
exactly.
I have a hard time believing that if Sterling was white, that question would have been asked. I mean, it was a weird question and a weird time to ask it. You know, if they would have asked it before the game, as if they would, you know, do interviews before the game had been played, in between the selection and the kickoff, have you justified your selection based on your
Yeah.
recent performance? That would have been a fair question. He did have a shaky end of the season. But after he scored the only goal in the game, I mean, it was a really weird question. And I find it hard to believe that would have been asked to a white player who scored the only goal in a game, whether or not it was justified for him to be in the starting lineup or not. Like, I just don't see that.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on, and we see it a lot. I mean, there's examples we can go on all day about it. To be fair,
Oh, for sure.
in English media, even in Russian media, I won't lie, it gets pretty depressing sometimes in Russian media as well. But yeah, man, Henry, thanks a lot for coming on. It was a pleasure having you on. We discussed everything, and I'm sure the audience loved your appearance as well. We'll be sure to have you on whenever Rubin are in the spotlight, which will be a fair few times over the next season.
Or when Finland win the Euros.
Or when Finland win the
Happy
Euros.
to bring you back on then.
Oh, I don't know if I'll be alive when I'm 800 years old or so, but, you know, we can hope. I mean, I'm a realistic guy. You know, everybody loves to dream, but I'm a realistic guy. I'll be remiss to miss the opportunity, though, for anybody that's listening. If you still want to hear more of me after this, which I don't quite get that, but some people, I guess, are, you know, masochists or whatever. If you want to hear more of me, you can check out the Guerrilla History podcast if you like listening to, you know, proletarian history type things. I'm one of the co-hosts of that show. So worth checking out if you have any interest in history and, you know, workers' movements and things like that throughout history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Give that a listen. Give that page a follow on Instagram. Give Henry's personal page a follow on Instagram, and of course
Twitter. I don't have an
Henry Kazan
Instagram
English.
personally.
Oh, sorry, my bad. That's what I meant.
Yeah,
Twitter. All of these are Twitter. So you can tell that I'm
Asleep.
I'm finally getting my tongue twisted, like I said I would at the start of the show. But yeah, follow all these pages. And Henry, thanks a million for coming on again. Hanu, thank you again for hosting.
Yeah.
Pleasure to have you back. And if anybody is still listening, thank you for listening. Leave a gold medal on SportRex, leave a like on YouTube, and leave us a comment on Twitter or anything else. Did you enjoy the show? What can we do better? All of that good stuff. Thanks a million. Listen next week.